Hello again. Now, in some earlier videos I've talked to you about setting yourself sets of goals and structuring your daily practice routine to help you work towards those. What I want to show you in this video is an idea for something to help you measure your progress and to stop you from getting too obsessed with the end product and keeping in focus where you've come from and the progress that you're making. Okay, what we're going to do is just start off with a piece of paper. Now, you can either just get a piece of paper, or some people I know, they actually work with like the back page of a diary or something that they carry around with them so they can keep referring back to this. It's entirely up to you. What you're going to do is get your piece of paper and mark it out in a grid pattern, something that looks a little bit like this. Now what you're going to do is, in that big column on the left hand side, think about the things that you want to achieve as a guitarist, as a musician, techniques, skills that you want to achieve. Now, depending on where you are as a guitarist, if you're more of a beginner or intermediate or advanced, the sort of thing that goes into that column is going to vary in level of detail or whatever. Now, if you're just starting out, you might want to have goals like knowing where all the notes are on the fingerboard. Now, that's a skill that you need to have. If you're intermediate, you might be thinking more about, you want to have things like string bending or hammer-ons, pull-offs. You know, those are things. Write those down in that column, skills that you want to achieve. Once you've done that, and you've got a list of skills, techniques, notice the piece of paper is marked out with numbers across the top, so we've got a whole load of columns on the right hand side from 0 across to 10. What I want you to do is think about where you are now, and for each of those skills give yourself a mark out of 10. Now, some of those things is going to be easier than others to score because they're more like quantifiable. You know, if the skill that you're working towards is having a knowledge of the fingerboard, you know, you can fully measure how many notes you know and where you could find them on the neck versus how many notes there are in total, and then come up with a based on the percentage of the neck that you know. You could say, well, I'm a 3 out of 10 or I'm a 4 out of 10, whatever, and that gives you your score. Other ones, it's a bit more subjective. You know, if you, for argument's sake, one of those things that you put in is like blues improvisation because you want to be able to improvise in a blues context. Really, it's only you that can judge how good you think you are out of how good you could possibly be, and give yourself a score on that. Again, this is something for you to measure your progress, so it's entirely up to you how you score yourself. Just be true to yourself. Don't puff yourself up and make out that you're better than you are. Don't be too modest. Come up with a realistic score for where you think you are, say on a scale of 0 to 10 for each of those skills that you want to work on. Then what you need to do is think about how good do you actually want to be. What's your target score for each of those? Now, it's not necessarily going to be 10 out of 10 all the way down that list, because some of those skills will be useful for you, but they're not going to be the be-all end-all. You don't need to be an absolute master of them. For example, that blues improvisation thing that I mentioned before, that's a realistic skill to have. If you've got that, you might also have on your list music theory, you know, being able to understand the relationship between chords and scales so you know and understand what it is that you're playing. But you don't need to be a 10 out of 10 on scale and chord theory to be a blues improviser. You know, if you want to play classical or, you know, some really advanced jazz stuff where you need to know the theory forwards, backwards, inside out, yeah, you'd be aiming for a 10 out of 10. But you might have more realistic expectations and say, well, I just want to understand what I'm doing. I don't need to be an expert. Well, fair enough. Mark your ultimate target as being something like a 7 out of 10. Again, it's up to you. You set your priorities for how important these things are to you, how complete you need to be in each of these based upon your overall targets. What you should end up with is something that looks a little bit like this. So there's an example of how that grid could look. A list of skills, then 2 scores on each row for each skill, one for where you are now and one for where you're going to. And that gives you something you can refer back to. Like I say, some people I know that like have this in a diary or whatever that they carry around with them and keep referring to it. Because the important thing is not to become too obsessed with that end goal. It's very easy to think about where it is you want to go, what it is you want to achieve, and you set your targets up here somewhere. But people fall into the trap of thinking, well, if I'm not achieving that, then I'm failing, I'm falling short. Well, you're not, because you're starting from a baseline down here. Anything in between is progress from where you've come from. And that's got to be something that encourages you, because you're moving towards your goal. So don't get despondent that you aren't achieving the ultimate goal. Put it in perspective and think about how far you progressed from where you started. And that's where a grid like this is quite useful, because you can score yourself, and then every 3 months, every 4 months, it depends on how intensely you practice. You can go back and regrade yourself, and hopefully you should start to see the gaps between those crosses closing up as you move towards the goal. You'll end up with a sheet after your first review. It might look something like this. So on that example grid, making progress towards some things faster than others, some things a little bit slower, but there is progress. There's something there to measure, and hopefully that stops you getting too despondent, because you are able to measure and see progress towards your goals. So this is something you can take. You can review it regularly, either for yourself, or if you've got a teacher, work through it with your teacher, so he or she understands what it is that you're trying to achieve and can see in the measure of your progress. You might find when you review this, and I always advise people, maybe once every 6 months, once a year, review your goals, because you might find, longer term, what it is you're trying to achieve, your perspective changes. You might pick up new techniques as you go in along that you want to give more focus to, or you lose interest in certain things. All manner of things can happen, but always keep your goals focused. And when you review the list of goals that you've got, think about, are they still relevant? How is this something that you're not progressing towards as much as you want? Maybe you think it's time to call it a day on that, and think, I don't want to work on this anymore. But I'd urge you to be very careful about doing that, and come up with a sound reason why you want to drop it off the list. Don't just drop it off because it's too hard, I can't do it. Keep it on the list. Keep working at it. Don't give up too easily. This is something you can use, using an example here for measuring your guitar expertise or your musical expertise. But it's a useful little system for measuring where you are, where you want to go to when you progress. You can use it for anything. If maybe you're doing a college course on something, or you're just trying to get your life in order, and almost doing some life coaching type things, and you're coming up with skills that you want. Great. Put those down, and use it as a measure. If you find this doesn't quite work for you and you want to adapt that system, or you get it using colour coding or something because it'll help you get to grips with it, it's entirely up to you. Take the idea, adapt it, make it what you want to, as long as it's going to serve you and help you to progress towards your goals as a guitarist, a musician, whatever. Okay, so hopefully you found that useful. Keep practicing, and I'll see you in another video sometime soon. Bye for now.